Sometimes it just doesn't work out, you know? I grow something and it doesn't work good, and this is basically how I handle that. I look at it and I evaluate it and basically just try and figure out what went wrong. And something always goes wrong, but it's important not to just throw up your hands and say, I don't care, I messed up, and really try to figure it out so maybe we can learn and grow it next year. This is gonna be one of my failures for the year. So this is my glorious corn. It's doing great, huh? It looks pretty good, but it's really not producing like I wanted to. And I can see, you know, hindsight's 20/20. As I look back, I see a number of things that went wrong in this bed, and we can kind of make it look a little bit better for next year, but for the most part, like, what's done is done. Now, the bright side of the situation is this is the best I've ever done with corn. This is my first year really trying to grow corn. Last year I grew a couple, and the year before I tried to grow just a couple ears, didn't work out well. So I said, you know what, this year I'm gonna dedicate a full garden bed to it, all the space that it needs. And that was really one of my first downfalls, I think. And I mean, before you get me, just hear me out. We've got roughly 32 plants in here. And I say roughly because things didn't go quite like we wanted. But you can see the real problem is here. Like, this corn looks to be about ready, and that's as big as the ear got. So that's not very big. Other than that, the plants grew fine. I did have to stake some up because of a bad storm we had and they fell over. But there was, from the beginning, there was things that just made it go downhill. Crazy, I'm out here and it's like a sun shower. It's sunny, but it's raining, so whatever. We had this garden bed planted right on time, but we had some germination issues. And this is, I mean, right where it went wrong. And so, if I remember correctly, we had 2 stalks come up, and then we came back and we seeded it again. Then we had a couple come up and we had to seed it again. So by the time it was all said and done, there was about 3 weeks to 4 weeks before everything kind of took. And that was just kind of really set us up for failure, in my opinion. So, and that really leads to like the small corn growth, because what happened was, as it grew, it was pollinating, but it was only pollinating a couple, and it just came sporadically through. Now everything's basically ready to pollinate, all that good stuff, but it's, what's done is done. You know, there's no more pollen coming off the tops. The ears are grown as much as they can be, and I'd say they're about 1/4 of the size that they should be. The other thing too is I wasn't sure really how much to plant in there, and as I stand back here and look at it, I don't know if you can see because it kind of blends in with the wild back there, but it looks like I could put actually 25% more corn in there. And that's something that I knew beforehand, and that's why I wanted to do a whole garden bed. And I knew that when you grew corn that you needed to have, basically, they always say plant it in blocks so it gets good pollination, this, that, and the other. So I figured like this would be enough. But between the fact that it didn't grow all the way, and then I had to come and reseed and all these different things, it looked to me as if I could have gotten more in and really increased that pollination. So especially because it's wind pollinated, when I came through, and I would come through and just kind of brush on it and try to get it to pollinate a little bit, there's just not enough in there. So the good news is I'm pretty sure that I can plant more corn in there next year and get it to do hopefully better. Now, what I've also heard, and I've said this before, is apparently when you get bees, your corn growth just explodes because they're kind of attracted to it. And unfortunately, they weren't very comfortable in their hive yet and really foraging yet when this was coming to be pollinated. The idea was originally that that would be the case, but we missed it because of outside circumstances. So it kind of is what it is. Now, what I will say is if you stand back here and look, so the sun tracks this way, look at what's right in the way, this big, huge limb. If I remove that limb out of that big tree, it's gonna let more sunlight come in and hit here. Now this is probably one of the lowest light beds, and this corn is supposed to be this tall. This is about 4 feet tall. So it is supposed to be about that tall, but it just doesn't look like it's real strong to me. So I think if I just come out here and just for the health of my garden overall, if I come out and then kind of trim this tree right here, I mean, I can clearly see the sun comes up right there. So if I eliminate that portion right there, we'll get a lot more early morning sun, and that'll add like probably 30 minutes to an hour of sun, which doesn't seem like a lot, but it is. Now, the only thing I can do about this is just wait for a hurricane to take them down, and that will happen. But I think that kind of factored into all of this too. The unfortunate thing is I can't plant corn right now for, you know, to give it another shot. I think it's kind of all said and done at this point, but I did get some good insight into what we're doing. And that's something, you know, not every failure in the garden is bad. You can turn it into good. And that's exactly what we're doing here, is we're turning this into a good thing. You know, each year we've tried to improve more and more. You know, we've had this ongoing public saga with Brussels sprouts. And to be honest, in the past couple years, I don't even really want to count trying to grow corn because I didn't put a whole lot of effort into it. And that kind of shows with what I did this year. But, you know, I read and they're saying, you know, a foot to 10 inches apart, and that's what I did. And I really think I can really pack it in there a little bit better, get more in there, and then increase that pollination. But the garden failure doesn't always have to be the death nail in the coffin for you. It's like, I would strongly suggest if you can look at it and figure out what you did wrong, I would not just be like, that's it, I'm done, and move on, because clearly you wanted to grow it in the first place, right? Yesterday I came out here and I planted my first row of Brussels sprouts. And it may not seem like a big deal to you, but to me this is a really, really big deal. I mean, if you think about it, this week it was 98 degrees as a high. On my back porch is like 115. It's really hot. And so I worry a lot about things bolting. And I generally plant these around mid to late September, thinking that I can really get enough growth, when that's just not been the case. I mean, last year I got so close to getting some actual Brussels sprouts that I just wanted to push it a little bit more. And the size that I ended up getting, I know that I can do better. I just really need to kind of stay on top of them, keep them cool. But if they say plant them in mid-July, then guess what? I need to plant them in mid-July. So that's what I did. And the only reason why I didn't do it on camera for everybody, like I said I would, was because I wanted to make sure I get them into the ground last night, because it was raining today, and it would just kind of help ease that process. And plus it's cloudy and we're getting a little bit of a break from the heat, so it won't be as harsh on them. So my plan for the rest of this bed is, in a week, I'll put in another row, and then in another week, or maybe even two, I'll put in the last row. And this is something that I have gained off of failure year after year after year, in which I'm like, look, I know I can do this. So I've developed this plan. Now, it took me a while to get to this plan, I will admit, and I really hope that if you're listening to this, this will help you get to the final plan better. But, you know, this is the most, the earliest I've done it, and the most I've planted, which tells you that I seem to have some confidence in what I'm doing. But this is, I think, what, year 4 or 5 of trying to grow Brussels sprouts. So at some point, I mean, you gotta win, right? Come on, let a brother get a Brussels sprout. So the corn, like I said, this year, this is really, I'm gonna count this as my first year trying, because actually this was the bed that I did it in last year, and I put like 4 pieces of, you know, 4 plants in, and it just didn't do anything. And I actually, this is better than what I had last year. So that being said, I think we're moving in the right direction. But I did find out something interesting about these Brussels sprouts. Got a little bit of bug pressure on them, and this is the heirloom variety here. So you can see there's a little bit of pressure there. Fortunately, or not unfortunately, but because of the plan that I have to plant the heirlooms first, I'll bring you over here to the hybrids. And remember, these were sitting right next to the other ones, like directly next to them. They've been treated and handled the same way as the other ones. And I want you to see how bad they got tore up by the cabbage worm. Look at this, would you? No difference in time apart, nothing. So they just tore them up. So the good thing is I wasn't on top of my game and I actually did not thin them. So I'm gonna let them recover and see what we can do about it. Now I'm sure some of you looked at that and you were like, Ben, what the hell? Why'd you let it get so bad? Well, let me explain. When it's raining, you can't spray, okay? And you know that I spray. So I just could not spray for a while because it was like every day we would get a splash of rain. I mean, just the smallest amount of rain, but then you might as well just take that little bit of treatment and pour it on the ground and walk away. So this is part of it too, because I was not under the impression, basically off of my own ignorance from the lack of me planting these plants, that I would have this issue this early in the year. I'm used to that. I'm used to like regular bug pressure. I'm used to tomato hornworms, stink bugs, squash bugs, Japanese beetles in July. I'm not used to worrying about cabbage worms, but you know, it is what it is. Now I know. So even if that is a failure, which I don't think it is, and I'm going to tell you why in a second, even if it is a failure, now I know I got to treat for cabbage worms earlier, right? And really keep an eye out. Like I just legit thought at first until I saw it, but then it was too late, that I need to stay on top of it. Now I will say this, my plan for that is to feed it heavy, treat it heavy, and let them come back. And I really do believe that we will be able to get some new growth, and the time that we have allotted for them to go into this space is actually going to be a little bit better for that whole scenario. Last year I did a video, and in order to save myself from some embarrassment, I'm not going to share it at the end. You can go dig and find it, but my sweet potatoes, I planted them over there and I maybe got 5 pounds out of it. They didn't even look close to this. Look at this. It's just a mound of sweet potatoes coming out. Sweet, sweet music to my ears and my eyes. But you know what? I had to get that failure last year to learn. You know, I had to learn to treat my sweet potato slips better, pay attention to the soil, till it a little bit, uncompact it if it's compacted, which that bed was, and really understand that this bed always produces my sweet potatoes better. Always produces them better than over there in the wild gardens. So that being said, like I can just go ahead and take this lesson that I learned last year, and it hurt. Man, it hurt. And if you think it hurts to get a bad harvest, try doing it and putting it on YouTube for people to see. It is painful, buddy. It is a painful thing. You got to kind of swallow your pride and do it down, but I just learned, you know. Now, I don't know what we're going to get out of this, but I can tell you by the amount of foliage it is, and as early as it is, we still have 2 more months before we can harvest them. It's looking mighty fine. And I have a feeling that we are going to be pretty happy unless something crazy happens. So it is what it is. My plan for this corn, harvest the baby corn, cut the stalks, and you know what, we'll dry them and we have some fall decorations. I mean, how stupid is it that you have to pay, what, $5, $10 for a bundle of corn stalks when clearly you can just mess up your garden and grow them for free? Not every garden mistake is a failure. Sometimes garden mistakes are your best friend.